Everyone? You like that, huh? Right? All right. I want to call this meeting to order, our study session, and turn to the clerk for a roll call.
Councilmember Steve Rice.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Pruszynski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Diane McNutt.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Mike Wasserman.
Here. Thank you very much, Jackie Rose. We now have the portion called verbal communications. If there's anyone here that wishes to speak about anything not on tonight's agenda, you may come forward and do so for 3 minutes. Citizen Ray.
Mr. Mayor, your agenda does not speak to the specific as to whether or not the public will have the opportunity to speak after the study session.
Yes, they will.
So, well, guess what? I'll wait,
Okay, thank you.
but I'll be back.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, we'll close the verbal communications portion. And the item that we have tonight is regarding the meadows, as I'm sure you're all aware of. And each of us council members has a little map that shows a 500-foot radius from where our home is. And any properties that fall within that radius, we're not allowed to participate in the decision-making process regarding that property. That happens to be my home. My home's located within 500 feet of the meadows, so I have to recuse myself, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to my very capable former mayor, current vice mayor, Diane McNutt, who will take things over as chair, and I will see you all on your way out.
Thank you, Mayor. What we're going to do tonight, because we do have a limited amount of time prior to the start of the regular council meeting, and we also have an interview that we have to do for a commission. So we need to be done with this portion at 6:45. However, if we have a lot of people in the public who wish to speak, and or if council discussion goes on at length, which has been known to happen on occasion, we will adjourn and then reconvene this portion of the meeting later before the consent items, after the ceremonial portion and council matters and manager matters at the 7 o'clock meeting. So don't feel that we are cutting you off. However, if you do think that you want to speak tonight, if you can fill out the speaker card and send it in, it'll help us in terms of managing the time most efficiently. So the process for this portion is we're going to start with a staff report, and then we will hear from the applicant, and then council will ask any questions that we have of staff or the applicant. We'll open it for public, and then finish up with council discussion. Mr. Loritz, are you up?
Yes, I am. Thank you. If we could turn to the first slide, thank you. Very, very quickly, this application is regarding the meadows. At this point, the applicant is seeking direction on the following policy issues: the reuse of the site for a continuing care retirement facility. The second item is applicability of the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines. The third is the applicability of affordable housing. The fourth is expectations regarding sustainability and green building. And then the fifth is planning and design issues. We have a recommendation on the following slide that parallels and is identical to what is in the staff report. The applicant will make a presentation tonight, and we're asking the council to take any of the following actions. First is to support the redevelopment and reuse of the site for senior housing with limitations, as I'll describe in a minute. Then secondly is to reaffirm that the subject property is not within the, and is not only not within, but or subject to the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines. The third is require full applicability of the town's affordable housing requirements, including consideration of fulfilling those requirements through potential equivalent off-site housing. And then fourth is to encourage sustainability and green building practices, although not required beyond existing state and local standards. The fifth item is to allow staff flexibility to recommend appropriate alternative approaches to address conflicting planning and design standards. And then sixth is to require a comprehensive current resident relocation strategy, including a guaranteed right of return to a unit at current costs plus standard annual adjustments. In terms of the first item, I noted that there was a caveat to the recommendation of supporting the redevelopment of the project, and the council in this particular instance is asking for high-level policy direction and may not provide direction or action on associated land use matters, including zoning, design, mass and scale, in advance of the legally required Environmental and Planning Commission review. That concludes staff's report.
Thank you. If it's okay with council, we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant and then open it for questions.
Good evening, Vice Mayor McNutt and council members. My name is Kevin Gerber. I'm President and Chief Executive Officer of Episcopal Senior Communities. I want to first thank the council and professional staff for taking the time to meet with us on this important effort. We are seeking your input and feedback this evening on a handful of policy issues that will help us evaluate redevelopment of the Los Gatos Meadows community. Episcopal Senior Communities is a not-for-profit, non-denominational provider of housing and services to older people throughout Northern California. Our primary service is one similar to Los Gatos Meadows. Los Gatos Meadows is one of 5 continuing care or life care communities that we operate. We also own and operate several, 4 actually, affordable housing communities for older people. In addition to that, we serve a number of older people in the community, about 2,500 people who are not in one of our retirement communities, but who receive community-based services. Los Gatos Meadows was constructed in 1971. It is now nearly 40 years old, and much like homes of 40 years, it requires significant redevelopment. Over those 40 years, we've maintained it well, but we've not made major modifications. It does require complete redevelopment at this point. Go on to the next. I think you're all familiar with where we're located. Los Gatos is proud to be one of the largest employers in Los Gatos, and our mission continues to serve the older people of Los Gatos and the surrounding community. We feel like we're an essential part of the fabric of the town, and our proximity to the downtown really allows residents to remain active, to volunteer in charitable activities, to shop downtown, and maintain connections to our broader community. As I said, we're proud of how we've been able to maintain the community, but we do have some shortcomings. You see some photos here. Many of our units are small. Approximately, our smallest units are 350 square feet. Our common spaces are inadequate in comparison to other retirement communities. We have no swimming or aquatic facilities. Our fitness center is currently in a studio apartment. Not all of our accommodations have full kitchens. In fact, the majority of them have what are very small kitchenette units. And so over the years, we've also tried to increase the size of our accommodations by combining small units. And so the number of our units have continued, total number of units have continued to decline. We know that to be competitive, most of our competitors are offering at least one bedroom den or 2-bedroom accommodations with approximately 950 to 1,000 square feet with full kitchens and many amenities for recreational and common use. this need to redevelop the community is something that we've studied for at least 2 years and know that we need to change the operation significantly for us to continue. Our philosophical approach in looking at our master plan is that we want to come to you not with something that would be very large and then expect to have that reduced. What we've really tried to do is we didn't want to artificially inflate the requested number of accommodations or the square footage in the hopes that we would get a reasonable number. We've really approached this in a way to be transparent, similar to a CDAC presentation in our updated plans. We are requesting on the front end the number of units and square footage that we think is absolutely necessary for a feasible senior community. We trust and hope that the town both appreciates our approach to this process. And I'd like to now call on Eric Morley to provide you with a summary of our redevelopment plans.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, Vice Mayor McNutt, and council members. My name is Eric Morley, 506 North Santa Cruz Avenue, Los Gatos. As you know, the property sits on 10.6 acres and was originally permitted for 222 units and beds, 111 parking spaces, and approximately 220,000 square feet of living space and garage. The community today currently maintains 198 units and beds with less than optimal square footage, as Kevin noted, much of that due to the consolidation of units. The existing buildings range in height from 1 to 4 stories, in addition to the 2-level underground garage. And when the property was originally developed, there was significant grading due to the current 2-level garage, as well as significant cuts, fills, and retaining walls that exist on the site today. For those of you who have been up there, the Meadows property is unique both in terms of its use and setting. Because of its location at the base of the hillside, the community is relatively hidden from the most views in town. And the current architecture with its substantial concrete facades is not harmonious with the surrounding environment. Our redevelopment plan will call for using environmentally appropriate design and construction to blend with the natural environment and really create a synergy between the design and the hillside that does not exist today. Our architecture will be stepped with the topography and oriented toward the contour lines of the site, and the craftsman architectural style will be planned also to provide harmony with the hillside setting. We plan to employ craftsman colors, materials, and finishes to really reflect the historic craftsman character of many of the surrounding neighborhoods and also a time-honored look and feel of Los Gatos. ESC has also engaged Perkins Will, one of the nation's leading senior housing providers of architectural and planning services for this important engagement. Paul Donaldson, who's here this evening, heads Perkins and Will throughout the United States, the senior living group, and is here to address any architectural or program goals. As was noted in the staff report, we presented a concept plan to the CDAC in April of last year, and both the CDAC and revised plans totaled approximately 37 new units compared to what was permitted originally, and 61 units more than exists today. The increase in units is mostly in the memory care and assisted living area. There are approximately 259 units that we would propose and about 350 parking spaces, including approximately 565,000 square feet, including both living area and replacing and expanding the existing underground garage. As noted in the staff report, the CDAC provided extensive feedback both on project issues and also on policy issues. And as noted in the plan here that you see before you, on the left is the CDAC plan and the right is our revised plan. We have eliminated all buildings from the upper reaches of the property. We plan to locate all new development on the existing footprint here today and include and improve life safety and fire access surrounding the site. We've also would plan to push the garage fully below grade to minimize height and conceal all parking. As we've noted also in our documentation, any redevelopment of this site that can be viable will include significant off-haul of soil, tall retaining walls, tree removal and replacement, and increased height. On the site today, buildings range from 20 to 57 feet, and that would increase to approximately 24 to 77 feet, with a small non-visible portion in the back at element at approximately 85 feet. Retaining walls on the site today range from 4 to 14 feet, and a new plan would include retaining walls ranging from 4 to 20 feet individually, although at the rear of the property, to address the fire lane, there would be multiple retaining walls separated by trees and planting at a total of approximately 4 to 55 feet. And last, in order to accomplish the pushing of the garage below grade and also to address the redevelopment, somewhere in the neighborhood of 140 to 170,000 cubic yards of off-haul would be required. That would actually be taken directly off-site and south on 17 with no impact on the downtown. As I mentioned, the site is visible from very limited areas in town, and while any redevelopment would be more visible than the condition today, as you'll see from the photo montages, we've spent considerable time and energy early on in this pre-development process utilizing the latest technology to understand what the implications would be. Here you can see a progression from CDAC existing to CDAC to our revised approach, bringing the buildings down off the hill. In addition, the same approach existing, the CDAC application, and then our revised. In terms of stakeholder outreach, we've also included the residents from the Meadows throughout the internal review process, many of which are here today. Residents participate in all design meetings and are updated regularly in written communications, individual and group settings. We've also advised all of our surrounding neighbors in writing that we are contemplating redevelopment and are in the process of following up with each and every one of them. And we anticipate extensive neighborhood outreach and interaction through an extensive multi-year process. Also, to understand community-wide views and to determine whether our plans were consistent with town values, ESC also conducted a community-wide survey of approximately 400 residents late last year. As you can see from the summary in your packet and also on the screen, public sentiment for redevelopment of the Meadows is extremely overwhelming and positive, and there's also a broad base of support. And we engaged that process to really understand for ourselves what the broader community thought and considered as it related to the redevelopment. In terms of the policy direction and staff recommendations, we wanted to highlight those. In terms of the use and expansion of this community, obviously we feel that's critically important to the extent that we are considering and agree with the staff recommendation. We also concur with the Hillside Design Guideline and Standards recommendation, although I will say that much of our planning will be in the spirit and intent of those guidelines, while obviously the letter of those guidelines are not applicable to a community of this nature, more suited to single-family homes. On the issue of affordable housing, I did want to clarify, as we did in our letter, that we noted that state law is clear as it relates to affordable housing for state-licensed facilities, continuing care, and that BMR, below market rate housing, would not be required for this site. We've had some dialogue with the town attorney, and I don't think that issue will be resolved this evening. I did just want to clarify for the council that ESC really wants to approach this from a partnership perspective, given its mission. Even if the below market rate ordinance were applicable or required as a community benefit, an off-site, an on-site, or an in-lieu fee requirement would result in the community not being feasible. And as I noted in our letter, ESC's mission includes significant development, construction, and operation of affordable housing, and we would like to pursue that with the town of Los Gatos, obviously, but separately financed and not as a condition of the project. The last two on sustainability, clearly every one of the consulting team members here is LEED accredited. Both sustainability and green building are a critical element to our design, both thematically and in practice. And we intend to do everything we can to really create a state-of-the-art sustainable community. And then last, as staff noted, to balance both the design considerations, the amount of off-haul size of retaining walls and height of buildings, there are a number of trade-offs. There are a number of design and planning considerations that will require flexibility through the process. With that, I'll ask Kevin Gerber to briefly talk about the relocation strategy and make a couple of closing comments. Thank you.
Over this process of developing these plans, we were looking at how would we phase this if that was a possibility. And certainly after the CDAC presentation, we realized that in order for us to address the issues, that this needed to be done in one phase, which would mean that residents would have to be relocated off the site. We take this very, very seriously. This is our utmost concern. This is our mission to care for older people, and many of the residents are here tonight. We've set out some principles in terms of what we feel are key to the relocation plan. And although this process will take several years, we've been very proactive in informing our residents and hopefully enabling to plan and do individual planning with each one of them in terms of what is best for them. First, our first principle is we honor all of our life care contracts as they are written and have been in place since residents have moved in. We would provide individual and customized plans for each and every resident and their families. Relocation of residents to other Episcopal senior communities or comparable communities. Coordinating relocation and funding the costs of that relocation, providing both for the move to the temporary location and if a resident was able and desirous of moving back, enabling them to return with no new entrance fee into a comparable accommodation and at a comparable monthly fee. As I've said before, the redevelopment of the meadows is essential and necessary to ensure that we remain operationally and financially viable into the future as our current model exists. As we consider the many issues that require mutual evaluation of this important effort, we would appreciate your policy direction and feedback and on the sometimes competing issues inherent in a plan of this nature. Probably my biggest fear is that we would spend 2 years of planning and environmental review and the application process only to come back and end up with a project that would be a floor less or significantly reduced. And we have limited, as a not-for-profit, we have limited resources, our resident resources, to be able to engage in that process. And so we're hoping in a spirit of partnership that we can receive your feedback this evening. Thank you very much for your time and the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. Mr. Gerber, could you give us, just for the record, a 1-minute definition of life care or continuum of care for those who may not be familiar with it?
Certainly. We are regulated by the Department of Social Services in the state of California. They grant us the authority, it's called a certificate of authority, to enter into life care contracts. And so in exchange for an entrance fee or a fee, we are allowed to enter into life care contracts. It's not a real estate transaction. It's a contractual where that life care or continuing care contract allows us to guarantee care for the rest of the individual's life. Does that help? And also continuing care or life care includes all the components of a continuum. So independent living, assisted, and other levels of care.
Okay, you're kind of glossing over those. I think for those who may not have been through this, with a family member, they might not understand independent, assisted, full continuum.
The continuum of care.
Okay, thank you. Would Mr. Lortz or Mr. Korb give us one more time again what we can and cannot talk to tonight as a guide for the public to also what we are focused on tonight and the specific subjects that will come up later in the process should the applicant decide to go forward.
I'll take a stab at it. You are able to discuss the specific policy questions you've been asked to whatever extent you wish, but you cannot discuss the proposal from the zoning perspective, what it is, how dense it is, how tall it is, the colors, etc., the various matters that you normally discuss within the context of a review of a specific application.
Okay, thank you. And could you raise your hand if you're out in the audience and you want to speak to this tonight as a member of the public? Okay, so we'll do questions from staff questions from council for staff or for the applicant. Mrs. Spector.
Excuse me, thank you. Mr. Lords, or I guess it would be Mr. Lords, on the recommended actions, number 5, allow staff flexibility to recommend appropriate alternative approaches. What are you talking about there? That's very general.
Yes, it is, and I'll give you an example. In the past, we've talked about good grading and bad grading. Good grading has been discussed as something that is, for example, under the footprint of the building to reduce its overall mass and scale. So the export of the dirt associated with the footprint of the building, dropping it into the site, is grading. And so ordinarily we'd say, well, that's not really a good thing. But if it is to accomplish the reduction of the mass of a structure, the council has been receptive to that and granted exceptions to the hillside standards to allow for that. That is the type of thing that I'm saying that in the one case it is an impact in terms of it in of itself, but it accomplishes something that we want to accomplish.
Mr. Rice.
Okay, I'm not sure how to phrase this, but we can't speak to massing and height and the like, but I'm hearing that that's something that they definitely want to know where, not necessarily where we stand on it, but I don't know, maybe that is what it is where we stand on the overall height, because I think what I heard was, well, if they're going to lose a floor, that might deal with or conflict with the viability of the project. So, Mr. Korber or Mr. Lords, how do we give feedback that is appropriate for that kind of an issue?
The one thing that I would offer is that in being respectful of the applicant's assertion that this is a balanced project, in order to move forward with this project, the amount of space that they need is a ratio between the numbers of units and the overall square footage in terms of facilities. And so that balance is something that the council could comment on as being, oh, that's an important thing for us to drill down on and be respectful of. And a helpful comment, and this would be one that I think would be okay, is that you're not overly concerned about the square footage difference between the existing project and the new project. It's more of the design and making sure that the project is adequately addressed through the CEQA process and does not significantly impact the site in terms of additional tree removal and things like that. Those are the kinds of balancings that I think the applicant is looking for and would be helpful to staff too.
Mr. Korb, you look like you want to say something.
I really want to urge council to stay away from the design issues and the density issues and the height issues. I think you can say something like, I can tell you that when I review the project, I'm going to be concerned about height and I'm going to be concerned about visibility, or I'm not going to be. Those are very general statements. If you wish to make those, that's fine. But I would stay off the conceptual designs that have been provided in this package. Stick with the policy issues only.
Any further questions? Mr. Brzezinski?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I want to I'm going to kind of recommend that we look at the 6 requests, which actually are not comprehensive and in terms of what the applicant's looking for tonight, but I want Mr. Korb to stay on top of us in terms of our dialogue, because it's so easy to move into the alternatives. And the alternatives are going to come before us at a certain point. But we have limited time and a few items that we need to address.
Mr. President, why don't we then take care of the public portion, since there's only one member of the public, and then we can move right into the discussion. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, so we'll open it for public comment, and we have one speaker, Mr. Davis. Do you want to come and have your 3 minutes now? Oh, now we have 2. Do we have any additional people that are going to pop up and decide they want to speak? Okay.
If I may, I think it would be more useful if we could comment after your discussion.
We have I think we should do the public portion now. We are probably not going to be done in time, and then you'd have to stay for a couple hours and pick up the public portion. So we will start with Mr. Davis.
Well, I asked my question of the mayor. I was assured I could speak after all the testimony. Now you're changing the rules.
This is the time for public comment. Do you want to speak now?
Only in Los Gatos.
Madam Vice Mayor, just a clarification for the viewing audience, there are no other staff or applicant presentations scheduled. This would be the normal time for public comment.
That is correct.
Well, I'm of course disappointed that there aren't more of the residents of Los Gatos who wish to speak. Because if this were approved as presented, this is a picture of the monstrosity. Can you believe that, sitting on a mountain, a hillside in Los Gatos? Now, I come down here from Orinda, and I learned in Orinda, you live on one ridge, and your neighbor lives on the other ridge, and you interface each other. So what one does on one ridge is very important to the viewshed of the people on the opposite ridge. And don't tell me this monstrosity here, this ugliness on one mountainside, hillside, doesn't show to the other side of Los Gatos, okay? Don't tell me, don't even suggest that. And these so-called entrepreneurs, developers, show us views of what is proposed from the valley floor. That is so irresponsible, so dishonest, so deceitful. I can't believe it's a church group. I can't believe it on its face. Unbelievable. So, furthermore, I'm looking at Mr. Lortz's recommendation. Maybe you know or maybe you don't know that Mr. Lortz is no longer our planning director, okay? Hasn't been for some time. It's been vacant. Yet he signs this director of community development. A fraud on its face. We have a brand new director coming in, Ms. Rooney. She's sitting right there, proof positive. Exactly what I'm talking about. An array for Ms. Rooney. Maybe at long last we'll get something that from her and her department reflects the values of Los Gatos and not the values of the dollar bill or every developer that comes along on a fly-by-night basis. Also, there's a recommendation here by Mr. Lawrence. Unbelievable. Town code prohibits the staff from making any recommendations. They are to investigate and inform, and that's all. And again, Lortz, I call him loser Lortz, maybe liar Lortz, is unbelievable. And so we can hardly wait for this new woman, okay? Well, I think you need to take that into consideration. And Lortz contradicts himself. He says there, the council may not provide direction. Then on the next page, Mr. Lortz says, staff has determined this is unique.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Warrants council direction. One contradicts the other. That's this guy Lortz.
Mrs. Quintana, can you move up to the microphone, please? We need to move along fast.
I hope I made myself clear.
I really don't have too much to say without first hearing what your thoughts are, but I do want to make a couple of comments. First, I want to ask, what was the noticing for the study session other than the immediate neighbors? This would appear to be a town-wide issue, not just a local neighborhood issue. Also, the hillside design standards and guidelines address residential use in the hillsides, mainly because that's what's expected in the hillsides is residential use. I should start off by saying I am not opposed to the existing use, but as the information that has been presented, it would appear to me, or it would appear even by the Mr. Morley's presentation, that there are going to be significant impacts from this. This is a major increase in the intensity of development, and I don't know how you can separate out the land use issues from all these other issues when this is going to be a PD zoning.
Thank you. I think it's a good idea to follow Mr. Brzezinski's suggestion and go through, I'm sorry, Mr. Larson, you wanted to say something?
Madam Vice Mayor, just wanted to respond to a couple of the comments with the facts. The extreme abuse of language about a fraud is totally inaccurate. The staff report is from me as your town manager. These are my recommendations to you as a council. Mr. Lorch remains the Director of Community Development and will be until his successor starts in mid-March, and there has never been a communication to the contrary. And regarding the last speaker, the subject parcel is explicitly outside of the hillside design standard guidelines as previously approved by council.
Thank you for those clarifications. Okay, so back to our recommendations. We have a hard stop at 6:45, is that correct? Okay, and council, we are prepared to extend this discussion after the 7 o'clock meeting begins, so don't feel rushed if you have a lot to say. So, as I said, I think Mr. Brzezinski's idea of taking this one at a time is a good one. Starting with the first, maybe we could put that slide back up that has the questions. And the first policy question is support redevelopment and reuse of the site for senior housing within the limitations that we have. Comments? Mr. Rice.
You want to go?
No, I.
He's the mayor.
Okay. I think that because of its proximity to the downtown and its existing use for senior housing, within the limitations specified below, I would be supportive of redevelopment and reuse of the site for senior housing.
Thank you. Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I, too, am in support of this. I think it's significant value to the community. It's proven itself significant. I think the wonderful members of the Meadows community that are here tonight to participate need to be acknowledged, and I know that you're working closely with the applicant to make sure that it's for the betterment of the entire community. There is no question in my mind this is the appropriate use. On the side of the hill, I would assume that the two speakers who spoke in the public portion are aware that the Meadows currently exists on that side of the hill, that this is not a brand new development, and that the impacts are already clearly visible, and that this is a question of a revitalization and a remodeling of a project that is serving the community to this point. So there's no question in my mind that as far as the first recommendation or first question, that we need to support this development and reuse.
Mrs. Spector.
I also think that we should support the use of this site for senior housing. With regard to its redevelopment, that will depend on land use issues that are not before us this evening.
And my take on this is I'm also positive about the potential of this. It has been there since 1971, so I think it's already proven itself to be a good site for a continuum of care facility, and I want to continue to make the distinction as we talk about this that one of our priorities in Los Gatos is to have a continuum of housing options for seniors, from affordable, very small rentals to everything else up the scale, and that a life care type of facility fits within that as an option that we need to offer our community. So I would hope that we would continue to be able to have 2 or more of those available in Los Gatos. Any other comments on the first item? Then we will move to the second policy question, and that is the question of the relationship with the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines. Mr. Brzezinski?
Sure. First of all, we developed the guidelines and standards for a specific purpose, and that was to protect the hillsides. And the footprint of the standards was explicit at the time of its development. I think we need to reaffirm it. I also, as an adjacent comment, would say that if you are aware of the current facility, you are also aware probably that no one in the house right now, including the people who are the owners of the property, were the people who developed this in its current form. And probably with the high standards that we're expecting, that it would not have been developed this way if we were here back in the 60s. I cannot wait until such time as the apartments that are on the cement pillars that are easily visible from the porte cochere of the toll house are eliminated, and we can look at design that really would match the town of Los Gatos as is proposed. Granting the fact that that's not our purview, so I don't want to say more than that, but I think that we all need to consider the fact that right now the hillside standards, as they're proposing to be in some compliance, would be by elective rather than mandate.
Comments from the other end? Mr. Rice?
Well, I appreciate the applicant's comments about the wanting to be within the spirit of the hillside standards and guidelines. I would agree that, the guidelines wouldn't address this kind of project anyway, and it is a redevelopment project, but as I said, I appreciate the willingness and the interest in supporting the spirit of those guidelines, and I will look forward to when we can actually look at them and discuss them.
And Mrs. Spector?
Yes, I would agree with that. On its face, the hillside standards do not specifically apply, but because they address development on the hillsides, they will, in their spirit and substance, apply to this project.
And I also agree with all of the comments made by my fellow council members. And it's 6:45, so I think before we take any more of these, we will, what am I doing? Am I adjourning, postponing, tabling?
Why don't you just table for the time being, and we'll go back to this item later in the regular meeting.
Okay, so we will table this item. We will adjourn this portion of the meeting. There'll be a 15-minute break while we do the interview. We'll start the regular meeting at 7 o'clock. There's some things that have to be taken care of, and we'll probably get back to this discussion around 7:15, 7:20. Okay, thank you.
adjourned.